But look, while we were doing that, because for people who are watching, that was a pre-recorded conversation from earlier this morning. You and George were talking about memes and who was winning the war of information. Let's bring Georgie back, shall we? Producer George comes back into the fold. And the reason I thought that, let's just pick up on what you guys were kind of going back. I had to sit back because it was playing in my computer, and I was terrified that if I touched anything, then all of a sudden there'd be, well, a porn site. No, not a porn site, but a site pop up over the kind of that thing. So I just sat back. So I don't know what you guys have been looking at each other and talking about. But I got to say, you were talking about memes and information based on the back of, that soldier. Look, that soldier's story. I mean, whether it's 100% accurate or not, I like to be accurate, so I will say allegedly. Man, it choked me up when I watched it, and I saw it yesterday on TikTok. The other thing that's happening is I've been watching the war on TikTok. Yeah, I've been watching the war live streamed on TikTok. I've been watching people sitting in parts of the, I keep saying the Ukraine. I said the Ukraine the other day, and George was like, yeah, that was historically how people referred to it, calling me old. So I'll try and just call it Ukraine. But people in Kiev on those first couple of days, just holding their phones to the windows and across that social media, showing me the war. When I say better, I say than any news agency. I don't mean better pictures, better quality, but more immediacy as to what was happening right there and then. And I guess we're going to talk about this shortly. We're kind of doing the same with the protest. You go into TikTok and you're watching people in Wellington on protest. So I don't know what we're going to talk about now because you guys have been talking about memes and stuff. So shall I bring your screen on, George?
Yeah. I mean,
can we do that? Okay, so we'll bring George's screen up. Go for it.
Yeah, this is a huge part of contemporary war. In fact, it's actually something I based a lot of my academic stuff on, my master's, my thesis on, something we could call war porn, or basically the immediacy of war now with technology, right? That we are able to, in real time, we even have this phrase, real time now, right? We're able to, as a Western audience, almost entertain ourselves. Like when Ukraine kicked off, you could go on Twitch and you saw like the titles like watching World War III, right? And there's a whole group of people watching this entertainment almost come out, and yeah, that's because of mobile technologies, but it's also because of something me and Chewy were talking about of a sort of meme culture, and the importance of hearts and minds, the importance of propaganda and information, the importance of having a sort of international backing, I guess, from people around the world. But here's a sort of example, right? We have the Miss Ukraine women here, posting these very well shot photos of.
Is it actually Miss Ukraine? Is that So that's actually the woman who would be going to the Miss World competition or whatever.
Yeah, Miss Grand Ukraine. I don't know if that's separate from Miss Ukraine. Wow. Yeah, maybe there's competing competitions.
Yeah, they've replaced the swimsuit section with this one.
Target practice. they do target practice competitions.
Because you guys were talking about the memes, and that's what we're talking about now. But I think as you're talking, George, I'm thinking about when we first really saw this to do with war on social media was probably the Arab Spring. Yes. And Twitter was one of the things that actually, enabled that protest or that rise up to happen. So I wonder, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not historically aware enough. That feels like that was the first time it was. And now we're talking about social media showing us the war, but also the new iteration of what happens on social media of developing content in the form of memes to combat the war, to educate the war, to build up morale.
Well, I think all of it. I think all of it. It's real important to consider that this still comes under the purview of propaganda, because you can sit there and go, well, I'm getting the war on my phone unfiltered. And that's not always the case. It can look unfiltered. There are definitely information ministries and that sort of thing. The Russians run troll farms where they just churn out propaganda. And I think it's important to recognize it for what it is. We are cheering for the underdog, but the underdog still does propaganda. I think that the best example of that, I don't know if you guys followed it, but the ghost of Kuryev, the fighter pilot who supposedly became an ace in one day. That came out very, very quickly. And there's absolutely no evidence that it's a real person or it actually happened. But people got behind that. The 13 of Snake Island galvanized everybody because it was just amazing. You know, people standing up and saying, "Fuck you, Russian warship."
And did you see the news out today? News out today is
they're alive.
Yeah, the original story was they said "fuck you, Russia," and then obviously the missiles hit, but they've been taken hostage. So I was also going to say as well, to do with the propaganda comment, Chewy, the bring that photo back up of her in the snow, George, because you know these photos have been taken of her of Miss whatever her face is, looking all militaristic and stuff. But the propaganda is she could be sitting back in her apartment in London right now. You know, so she's putting, that's the propaganda aspect. She's putting these out there maybe as a way of solidarity, maybe as a way of inspiring, you know, Ukrainian brothers and sisters, but it doesn't mean necessarily she is doing it. So that would be the element that I think, is this propaganda or is this like genuine? You know what I'm saying?
And I certainly wouldn't say, quite often when you hear people say propaganda, it's got, you know, propaganda is a bad thing. Propaganda is what it is.
Yeah.
It can be informational. You know, it's positive and negative depending on what side of the argument you're on. But I think it's very clear that the Ukrainian information is coming out to us very freely, and we don't know what the majority of your average Russians are hearing. And I think one of the most genius things that the Ukrainian forces have done, and I've seen quite a few videos of this, is when they've taken prisoners, that they've given them a phone and say, "Call your mother, tell them what you're doing."
Yeah.
You know, you know, that as the ambassador was reading out, I'm not in Crimea, I'm not in training, I'm in a different country. And
what are we doing here?
That has to be having an effect. You know, if you've got soldiers in theater with their cell phones and they can jump on TikTok and see, oh, my commander is not telling me the truth, the people don't want to see it. And I think that's why you're seeing a very strange thing over the past couple of days of units deliberately getting lost, deliberately running out of fuel, going to the local police station, handing themselves in, abandoning their vehicles and walking to the border. I don't know how widespread that is, but that is definitely happening.
But that's not historically inaccurate as well. There are so many stories about World War I and World War II of people in trenches opposite each other firing over the enemy's heads. Because I mean, so this is absolutely part of war. Is the people, the generals at the top who are sitting back in their, let's say, ivory towers or whatever they are, even if they're 2 miles back from the front. In this instance, perhaps in Moscow, you know, sending these 17 to 30-year-olds off into war, and they get there and they go, "But hang on, Mum, we were told that we were liberators, and you know they're telling us to put sunflower seeds in our pockets, so when we die on their land, sunflowers will grow." The most gangster woman there's ever been on the face of the planet, you know. So it's, so I think the question I guess will be is, I don't know if it's unquestionable, but it would appear to me that even though there is a lot of dissent within the ranks, that the Russian military force is bigger than the Ukrainian military force. How much do we have to see of the Russian soldiers pulling out, dropping their swords, getting out of there? Will there need to be for this to be, I won't say a fair fight? There shouldn't be a fair fight, but you know what I mean? Like how much infighting do they have to have, or how much attrition do they have to have from likes of that person who was texting his mum before actually it becomes almost a non-combative force because they're ineffective? But then again, they've got a missile they can just launch from Moscow as well, which can probably do the job of 1,000 soldiers.
Yeah, I think it would have to be massive. It would have to be a massive mutiny, right? You think about it, you know, while Putin is isolated and possibly losing political allies in Russia, it would have to be a pretty full-on mutiny or coup against Putin, and that would be a huge thing. And you mentioned the missiles. I mean, this is another thing. We watch the war from afar. A lot of Russian soldiers watch the war from afar, right?
Yeah.
They on their computers, on, you know, whatever it is, just the same as the, you know, American dude in Nevada in a container ship controlling a zone and a drone in Pakistan. We also have here in Russia. Russia has this technology as well, and cruise missiles were used predominantly in the early stages of this war. So yeah, I mean the grunts on the ground will be feeling disaffected, but one, Putin still has allies, and two, wars are fought remotely often as well as on the ground.